Hi, in this video we're going to be talking to new chiropractors or soon to be new chiropractors or chiropractors about to start over looking for a better way to go into practice. My name is Dr. Tim Langley. I'm a chiropractor in Marietta, Georgia. I've been practicing for almost 20 years now. I have what's called a membership practice. I remember when I was about to graduate from chiropractic school, a leading practice management consultant came and spoke to a group of us who were about to graduate. And he talked about 3 ways you could go into practice. So we'll talk about those 3 ways and the pros and cons through this video. And then we'll have a series of videos following this about how to get started, how to market, and just really how to build a practice that is sustainable and enjoyable. This practice management consultant gave us 3 suggestions for going into practice upon graduating and getting licensed. The first way, and probably the way that most new practitioners think about going into practice, is to associate with an experienced doctor. Of course, the advantage of that is that you got an income right off the bat. You're practicing with someone who has already proven some level of success, and you get to learn some bedside manners, some adjusting skills, and hopefully some business skills as well. The downside of that, according to this practice consultant, was typically new graduates don't offer very much more than a degree and a license to a host doctor. In other words, your skills are at their very least when you first graduate. I know some students graduate with more experience than others, and a lot of students adjust a lot while they're in school, not necessarily in the clinical setting. But when you first come out, you don't offer an experienced doctor a lot. In fact, you take away a lot of their time to train you hands-on, so you actually distract somewhat from them taking care of their own patients. But typically, because you offer them less, they offer to pay you less. You're not going to get typically 50% of what you collect or what is collected on the people that you bring in. You're going into that office thinking that you're worth $60,000 to $80,000 a year to start. It's not going to happen. So a lot of times, in a lot of cases, your pay is subsistence pay, and if you're going to make anything more than that, it's going to be based on bringing in new clientele into the practice. Now, another drawback to that scenario is that you're going to sign a limited term contract for the most part, usually 2 years, 3 years. And then at the end of that time, you may have the opportunity to renew, but if you decide not to renew, you're going to have a non-compete clause, and you can go and start another practice, but outside the market area that the clientele that you have built will be in. So you will have built someone else's practice for a couple of years and then have to go and start all over again. So while that you will learn some skills for a couple of years, your income is not going to be that great, and in a couple of years you're going to have to start a practice all over again. Now, the second option that this consultant mentioned was buying a practice. Well, that sounds awfully good, and if you find the right situation, it can pay off in tremendous ways. I have a friend that bought a practice when he graduated from school from a chiropractor who'd had a death in the family and just simply had to move away. So he got a good deal on buying the practice. The owner of the practice carried the financing, so he had an ongoing practice which had diminished somewhat, but he did have clientele, he did have equipment, he did have a location, and there had been a history there. If you find a situation like that, that's ideal. But here's what typically happens when you buy a practice. The practice will have been there for quite some time. And the seller of the practice is trying to get rid of it for some reason or another, and you don't know what that reason is. So as a new practitioner, you typically go in not understanding the ways of the world, not necessarily knowing how to value a business, not knowing how to evaluate that business. You end up buying old equipment that has been there for years and years. Leasehold improvements are old. The furniture looks really old, the equipment is old and worn out, and ends up having to be replaced eventually. You end up buying old employees who've always done it the way it's being done right now. And as I learned when I got out of chiropractic school, every new graduate knows everything about running a business without really knowing anything. So, you're going to go in there and you're going to want to change so many things, and you're going to get resistance from both the employees and the patients, because this is the way we've always done things. Why do you need to change? And besides that, folks have been accustomed to working for this particular doctor or being their patient for a long, long time. And a lot of those folks will leave just because that doc is gone. So you're going to end up losing employees and having to replace employees, or maybe even having to fire employees. You may find that there have been few controls on the business part of the practice, and then someone new comes in and they discover that there are significant financial problems or management problems. So you end up losing a lot of employees and having to add new systems and so forth. And then the third problem that you run into is old patients. Now, you buy a practice so that you have patients and you have a source of income already coming in from day one. Well, part of the problem with that is if you've bought it based on past records, you may not be seeing the state of the practice as it is now. And you'll probably find if you evaluate a practice, the books on a practice, that the income and the patient load has been diminishing over the last few years. So it's already a dwindling practice. So what happens is the new doc comes in, has their own way of adjusting, doesn't have the same bedside manner as the original doctor, doesn't have the relationship with folks, and then you're going to go in there and you're going to want to make changes so that the business runs the way you want it to run. So in a lot of cases, when you go in and take over an existing practice, you end up losing anywhere from a third to a half of the clientele. So you need to factor that in to the consideration of buying that practice or valuing that practice. And then the third way to go into practice is to start your own. All right, so what are the advantages of starting your own practice? Well, every new patient you start is your patient. They've come in because either they like you or they like what you have said about chiropractic. So you don't have to change anyone's mind. Those are your customers from day one. The other advantage is you find your location. All of your equipment is new and is what you wanted in your practice. And because you're starting new, you can start with a very low overhead without incurring much, if any, debt. Okay, so what's the downside? Well, the downside is you have to work your butt off. either before you graduate or before your license comes. You've got to get out there and identify the community in which you want to practice. You've got to start calling on folks. You've got to let the community know that you're there. But guess what? In any of the other situations, you're going to have to do the very same thing. But this way, you build it from the ground up. You know what the foundation is. You don't have to change anybody's mind. You start with a very low overhead. I mean, very low overhead, which takes so much pressure off. You know, it's tough enough coming out of chiropractic school with the amount of debt that you're going to have these days as it is. You don't need a $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 a month overhead the first day of the month to make up. You start with a low overhead and you can be profitable literally from the very first month. So that third option is my favorite option. It's the one that I recommend to literally everyone that comes out of chiropractic school. I know there are some people that just want to work for someone else. They just want to be told what to do. They don't want to worry about taxes or overhead or whatever. All they want to do is adjust. In that scenario, then there are chiropractors looking for associates. But if you want to get off to a great start without a lot of debt burden, starting your own practice is a great way to go. Now, in subsequent videos, we're going to talk about how to start a practice. My specialty is cash practice and a membership practice. So we'll be talking about that. We'll talk about a simple practice to run and operate and to have a low overhead. Be able to practice chiropractic the way you imagined it could be practiced without hassles. So keep watching for our videos. If you've liked this video, do me a favor. Hit the like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is Dr. Tim Langley, chiropractor in Marietta, Georgia, bidding you farewell and have a great day.